So just to kind of give everyone an introduction for our guest tonight, which I'm quite excited about because, as some of you might know, our last interview is quite some time ago. We've kind of had a long break since June of last year. But now I'm really excited that we are able to have an interview again, and I hope you can ask as many questions as you can and learn as much as possible from this little session tonight. So, our guest tonight has had a wide-ranging career in music that goes back more than 20 years now. He has released multiple critically acclaimed albums, and the names are always a bit too difficult and long, so I'll just kind of look at them again. So we had, in 2014, How Can We Be Joyful in a World Full of Knowledge? Then in 2016, we had Those Who Throw Objects at the Crocodiles Will Be Asked to Retrieve Them from 2016, and then Worst Summer Ever from 2016 as well. And finally, the album we will be listening to tonight, Private Reasons, which is from last year. But this is not kind of the only endeavors Bruno had with music. He started his career by playing classical guitar, but has since developed into a multi-instrumentalist and has looked into making music for TV shows, movies, theater productions, and general performing arts, in addition to working with loads of other musicians around the world, for example, in Japan as well. And I think that will all offer us some very interesting insights into his career as a whole today, but also specifically into the album Private Reasons. So, with all that being said, I would like to again extend a very warm welcome to Bruno. And first of all, Bruno, I hope you're doing well, or should I just say, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Actually, working on a new piece for orchestra. It's like a sort of commission. It's my first piece for a symphonic orchestra, so I've been working on that. And luckily, we'll be able to tour the Private Reasons record. The tour is starting on the 24th of February, and we'll hit the road at that first date that we have, and then we'll tour in Portugal with promoting this record we're gonna listen to, and then after that we'll visit Japan once again on June. We'll go to Japan on a small tour, but it's so far away from here, so it seems like a big tour, and Japan is quite a beautiful country, so this is where we stand right now.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, regarding that, how do you feel about, being back to live music again? I don't know how long you've had a break from live music now, but I assume it's also been quite a while. So how do you generally feel about going out and performing again and going on tour?
Yeah, the thing is, we were supposed to start performing in September, but everything got canceled because of the pandemic, of course, and then we're gonna start all over again next month. But it's I miss it, really. We all do, because it's part of our life and job. So it's like not having water, so to speak.
No, I can imagine, definitely. Well, I'm glad that it's going back, and I'm sure we're gonna see some fun little snippets from the concerts from you in the next couple of months. So I'm also quite excited to see that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So, but as today we will be listening to Private Reasons, I'd kind of like to also take a step back first and kind of look at the year 2016, because that's when you released 2 albums, and then Private Reasons came out 5 years later, and 5 years is obviously a long break. And what I'd like to know is kind of what happened in those 5 years. What was kind of the process that after Worst Summer Ever and after Those Who Throw Objects at the Crocodiles Will Be Asked to Retrieve Them, what was kind of the creative process you were going through that led to Private Reasons 5 years later?
Well, the thing is that between those two records from 2016 and this one here, what happened was I was very, very busy working as a composer for commissions. So I did a lot of work with theater plays, and television and cinema. I also did my first ballet soundtrack. It was for the National Contemporary Ballet of Portugal. And I did a lot of works, a lot of commissions for other people, and so I didn't really have time to focus on my own project. So that was the main reason why it took me so long to release a new record. And then when all of that was done, I started to compose what would become the Private Reasons record. And the process was really strange because we were supposed to start in 2020, but then the pandemic hit Europe really hard. So I had to postpone a lot of the schedule we had before. But in a way, it was good because I had more time to work on certain arrangements and certain aspects of the production itself. So, and what happened was that the record only came out in 2021 in March. So, but it was a project for 2020, but then the world changed and we had to release it later.
No, that definitely makes a lot of sense. What I find quite interesting about Private Reasons, and I spent some time going through the records again and your discography. And if we look at kind of your first record from 2014, there's this kind of very distinct, like looped vocal sound, or the kind of the looped drums, and that is kind of almost similar to Stereolab. And if I recall correctly, in one Reddit AMA, you mentioned that you were quite fond of Stereolab as well. Which is funny because one of the professors at our uni is also a member of Stereolab.
Really?
Which I didn't know for the longest time.
Who?
I need to. What was his name again? I think it was Joseph Watson, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
So he joined after Emperor Tomato Ketchup and Dots and Boots, but he's kind of now part of their lineup and does a lot of the live performances. And he's kind of the keyboard, I think.
Yeah, keyboards. I saw them performing live 2 years ago, I think, and he was already there, of course. If you've been that so long.
Yeah. And then if we kind of look at your 2016 album or record, that's kind of a move towards more jazz fusion, even elements of prog rock, I feel sometimes. And then Worst Summer Ever then is just almost pure jazz and jazz fusion. And I find that quite the interesting development looking at Private Reasons, which I feel kind of combines all of these together. So did you have a clear intention when you started making Private Reasons with the album? Did you already have an idea which sounds you'd like to develop further coming from those free records before?
Well, one thing's for sure. I knew that I wanted to include the Step Out of the Light song, which is the almost the last song of the record. And I already had the Loop Joy song, was the first one I did, and Theme Vision. And these songs, Theme Vision and Loop Joy, are very popish songs, very cheerful. So I knew in advance these songs will be a part of the record, but I didn't know anything else really. I just will work as the ideas came. Let it work that way. Kind of a freedom,
No, that definitely makes sense. I mean, it was just very interesting to see for me kind of the progression that happened alone from 2014 to 2016, because I do feel like that those three projects are so in many ways similar, but also very widely different from each other. And I find that in that short amount of time to jump between those different kind of sounds is quite impressive. And then now with Private Reasons, I feel that comes together quite nicely with various elements of, I guess, various different genres coming together. And I think last weekend, me and my flatmate, we had another listen to the album, and what we realized, and I hope what a lot of other people will realize when we start listening, is that there's so kind of many elements one can pick up on, and so many different kind of changes in tone or kind of changes in instrumentation that are just quite exciting. And then if you kind of have the full development from the other prior records, that kind of makes it a very interesting experience. But with that being said, I'd also like to, before we jump in, I'd kind of like to look back or kind of look at, Portuguese music in general, because I was quite interested in understanding kind of the context of, how you started getting into music and kind of the music culture in Portugal. Because I think for a lot of people who are not kind of too close to music in Portugal, or aren't, too aware or listen too much Portuguese music, it seems like a completely different world. And I feel like a lot of people, the only kind of cornerstone they have with, I guess, Portuguese language and music is probably bossa nova or samba from Brazil. Yeah, and like people like Antonio Carlos Jobim and João Gilberto and people like that. So could you kind of give us an explanation of how Portuguese music actually looks like and how that kind of influenced your move to make music like the music you're making now, which is, also a bit more international, if that's the right phrase, because I mean the music you're making after all also has English names and everything. So how does that all come together?
Yeah, so that's because I mainly listen to when I was a kid, as a child, I mostly listened to bands from UK, from the United Kingdom, and from the US, and I didn't listen a lot to Portuguese bands. Of course, I listened to a couple of them, but they were not my main focus as a child. Although I have listened to a lot of music from Brazil, as you mentioned before, I even when I was doing my first course in jazz, I studied in a school where nowadays I'm a teacher, and we had an ensemble that only played Brazilian music, not only MPB, which it stands for a popular Brazilian music, but also fusion, like Hermeto Pascoal. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Hermeto Pascoal, well, he's like this Brazilian genius who plays a lot of instruments, and his music is like a mix of different styles, and it's very, very hard to play because it's very virtual. Like he has this kind of jazz into it, but you just have to listen because it's very different from the music I know from Brazil. And Hermeto Pascoal is one of a kind. So we had this group, and we played a lot of Brazilian music, and then we played a lot of jazz. And I always listened to a lot of different music, so I didn't focus my career on a specific genre. And I think that led to where we stand now. That I feel free on doing and composing the music that I feel at the moment. I don't, have a specific process or anything like that. I just go with the flow, and if I want to create some Afrobeat, South Africa disco 70s sound, I'll do that, or if I want to do a classical arrangement for strings and woodwinds, I'll do that because I have enough knowledge that I learned from school and from my own experience as a musician to do it. So I feel that freedom in my process when I'm composing and playing, and it's a very good thing, I guess.
Oh no, definitely. I mean, I feel like when you say that, I can instantly kind of see that in especially in private reasons. I feel like I can, you can actually see how all these different sounds, that there's not really a specific kind of set of rules there, or kind of that it needs to be in a certain genre or it needs to follow a certain playbook. It's just kind of whatever adds together nicely. And I think everyone who hasn't listened to the album yet will also see that in a second. So with that being said, I suggest that we jump into the first track. And I think, the first track is Family Vows. And I'm sure we'll have a couple of comments in a second. So again, everyone, if you have any questions throughout a song or any comments, put them into the listening sessions channel. And then we'll listen to Family Vows now.
Okay, sounds great.
All right. So that was the first track, Family Vows. And I feel like the reaction I saw from most people, everyone really enjoyed that. I mean, for me, this one's a great opener just because it kind of already combines so many kind of interesting elements together in just a single track. And I especially like kind of that little bit where this kind of robotic voice comes in, I think, after about 3 minutes. Then you have these two loud drum beats. And then gets back kind of into this nice, I guess, breezy guitar. But first of all, what I'd like to ask, because I kind of try and ask this all of our guests, so how do you listen to your own music at all? Because we've had guests before, when they then came to our session and listened to their own album, they did not, or weren't at first too fond of it because they were like, this sounds weird. Oh no, I should have done this better, and things like that. Do you have kind of a similar reaction?
Sometimes, but I haven't listened to the record in a long time. It felt good, really, to be honest.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. So what I'd kind of like to know as well, if we have any questions, let me just check quickly. No, doesn't seem like it. But what I find quite interesting is, and I mean, you're obviously a trained musician. You also teach music, so you obviously have kind of the technical background in music. But for me, for example, even though I play the drums, for example, I wouldn't really consider myself an expert on music theory and kind of, I guess, the technical aspects of all of those things. So what I do feel like with this album, though, it kind of quickly generates a certain feeling. It has this very kind of summer feeling, this very light feeling that you can just play when the weather is nice out. And it kind of instantly transports you to kind of that kind of feel. And what I always wonder is with, if you make music and you kind of know the technical things, how do you think that kind of feeling is generated through the technical things? Because I think for most people, it's just purely a subjective thing. They think the kind of the combination of the instruments and certain things, or maybe the guitar kind of adds to that feeling. But given that you kind of, made the music, what do you think from a pure technical point of view leads to this kind of feeling? Or, what kind of, if that makes sense.
It makes, I haven't really thought about it, but I would say that it's the harmony context that makes the music sound so light, That's why a lot of people get that feeling when they heard, first time they hear this kind of music. They feel good, and it brings them, puts them in that kind of environment you were describing earlier. Tropical, near the ocean, summer breeze, and all of that. I don't think the music that way. It doesn't make me feel that way, but for most people it does. So it's a good feeling to be shared with.
So how does it particularly make you feel then?
Well, this song in particular, I think it's a bit of a. I think it's nostalgic. I think it's a nostalgic song. up until one point, and it flips and it changes to something really different. In that part you mentioned before, where those loud timpani comes in, and with a distorted voice, and then it changes to a different place, but then it goes to in the kind of 70s direction, using that phaser sound with the guitar solo, and then it brings again the first motive, the first melody, but in a different key. And most people don't know that. It's not a trick, but it's something that helps the music. Since it's so long, it's a long track, it helps to not get tired of the song. It changes keys. It starts in one key, and when you listen to the last part, which the melody is quite the same, and the guitar parts are the same as well, but it's in a different key, a more shining, bright key. In a musical perspective, of course, it doesn't make that difference, but subconsciously it does.
Well, that's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I feel, that's, for example, something I wouldn't necessarily realize on first listen. That would kind of would probably take some time to realize at some point, but no, that's very interesting to hear. All right, so unless anyone has any other questions, I'd suggest we move on to the next track, which is La Feta Uti. And I think recently you also released a music video for that song, which
today.
Today. So, so I'll link that one into the listening sessions channel if anyone wants to watch that later. I had a look at it earlier, and it was a very interesting video. I really enjoyed it. So if anyone wants to look at that later, I will be posting that into the chat in a second. So here we go with our second track. Okay, so that was the second track. I think everyone quickly recognized, that very strong drums, or the drums throughout the track, which are probably one of my favorites throughout the entire album. But then obviously the vocals, which I still have a question about as well. I think you said during that AMA on Reddit that the lyrics for the song are a secret. Or could you be able to tell us a bit more about them this time around?
Well, I invented the language.
Okay.
It's an invented language. So the words don't have a particular meaning, but that's a lot of meanings to it. So that's the information I can reveal right now.
I mean, that's good enough. But I also felt like I heard some Korean throughout the track, and some points where there were these kind of small electronic or kind of the more robotic voices. I don't know if that was me just mishearing.
There's no Korean in this song. Although there's Korean on Jari 1 and Jari 2.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. I also saw we have a question from username are these songs compositions written by you, then brought to this group of musicians to record, or was it more a collaborative process?
Well, this song in particular, I kind of did the pre-production all by myself. And the demo, the pre-production demo, is very, very, very similar to what happened then on studio. So, but in this song, other songs, it kind of has that more collaborative environment, but not this one in particular. But other songs it does, especially on the previous record, Crocodiles. This one was more composed and written on score and a lot of pre-production, and that was that. Yeah, I don't know if that answers to the question. Hope so.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that we'll see in a sec if that was good enough. Yeah, perfect. Thanks for the question, by the way. So, what I was also wondering, speaking of kind of your group in general or the other musicians you've been working with, how long have you kind of been working together with that group? Is that kind of a kind of longer relationship that has kind of grown out of your time at music school or out of your teaching experience as well?
Yeah, exactly. Half of the ensemble I met in jazz school, Hot Club. That's the name of the jazz school in Lisbon, Hot Club, where I teach guitar in combo. And most of the people I met there, and some of them went to the University of Music with me a couple of years later in 2007. We went to the same College of Music, and so, but the other part of the band I met in a rock context, playing in other bands and playing in festivals, and I kind of um, met him that way, and I invited him to be a part of the band, especially Francisca. She's a singer and guitar player. Afonso, same thing, voice and guitar. And Nuno Lucas, he plays the bass. I also knew him from that rock background. The other musicians I've been collaborating for quite some time now, from different bands from the beginning of the 2000s. So yeah, 20 years, something like that. Maybe a little less. Let's say 15 for sure. Yeah.
So how specifically does that kind of process then work when you work with these people who you've worked for or with for a long time now? Does it become easier over time that some things are instantly understood and everyone kind of knows how things kind of should look like, or how's that kind of entire relationship then kind of built upon?
Yeah, exactly. Since I know these guys from such a long time, when I explain something and when I try to produce something and ask them about the sound, they already know what I want because they know me as a friend for start, and then as a musician. So it's very easy. Uh, it's a very natural process in the studio when we were working together. It's very easy, and I don't work. Usually, I don't work in commercial studios. Only when I'm working in commissions or playing professionally. But when I record my own records, I don't have like a counter per day on the studio. So we have all the time in the world. We need to make it work, and so it's always easy. I don't know how to put this in better words because I know them for a long time, and the pre-production it's already very organized, so it's a very natural process. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, that all sounds very good. So I think, unless there are any other questions for now, we will jump into the next track, which is Fuzzy Soul. And yeah, again, everyone, feel free if you have any comments or questions, just chuck them into the channel. They also don't have to be song-specific things. Whatever might interest you, feel free to ask whatever. And exactly, next song is Fuzzy Soul. Okay, that was Fuzzy Soul, and I feel like a very nice kind of transition into kind of a slightly different sound. We already have a couple of questions. So the first question I got was, which is maybe a bit unrelated for now, but someone asked what your biggest influence in music is in general, or if there's one big person or group you can name as a big influence for you as a whole.
Well, I don't have a direct answer for that, but there's this composer. There's like maybe 3 or 4 composers that I really, really love and respect, but they're not my favorite composers, but they're four of my favorite composers, and there's not a specific order to them either. But first one that comes to mind is Liz Baxter, which was a composer. He's original from California, and he worked in cinema and with a lot of orchestras. His name is Leslie, of course, but he goes by the name of Les Baxter. And he was like the pioneer of the exotic music. Of course, Martin Denny came along, and some people say that he stole all the ideas from Les Baxter and made it popular, but we'll never know. So Les Baxter, yeah, I really love his work. And Carla Bley, she's also American. She lives in New York. She's a composer and a pianist, Carla Bley. And Artur Verocai, which is a Brazilian composer and arranger. Artur Verocai. Lately, he did some arrangements for Bad Bad Not Good. It's a band from Canada. Probably you've heard of them. And
he also did, if I can interrupt for a sec.
Sure.
He recently did the arrangements for Tyler the Creator as well for a fashion show last week.
Didn't know about that.
He's everywhere again, and I think a lot of people hear like his self-titled with, I think it's Naboka Soul.
Oh yeah,
that's
a classic.
Yeah, so I like that one a lot as well.
Yeah, that's probably his most popular record of all time.
Yeah.
Artur Verocai would be one of my and also Quincy Jones, because Quincy Jones is one of a kind. I don't know if I ever met anyone like him in terms of the ability and he has to produce all these different records, all these different genres, and the way that he worked in the industry. He is a very intelligent person, and he started as a jazz player, playing the trumpet in a big band, and then he started to work as a arranger with Sinatra. Actually, I think it was Frank Sinatra who put him in the spot concerning the industry, and it's just amazing. And he has this foundation for hip hop and jazz artists, and then he did all this work with the amazing guitarist George Benson, and with Michael Jackson, and with all these bands and movie soundtracks and everything. So he's unique, because usually people that are very, very good producers, they tend to work in a specific genre, and this man went through everything, but in a very classy way. And yeah, I really admire him. So I would say those four artists.
Yeah, I mean, I really get that comment about Quincy Jones. I mean, I've suggested to a couple of people to also watch a documentary of his that's available on Netflix, I think.
Yeah,
it goes into all of it. I mean, one of my favorite songs of all time, which is a song by Tamia from the 90s, is an R&B song called So Into You, which is also produced by him. And I feel like he just did pretty much everything. I mean, he, as you said, he started with jazz, then influenced the entire kind of soul and funk genre with the Brothers Johnson as well. There's just so many things he influenced. And then obviously Michael Jackson, which you mentioned, and then even R&B. It's just quite impressive how a career can, last that long and be so influential for not just one genre, but just music as a whole. And that's quite impressive.
Exactly. Really. That's it.
Yeah, so I also saw we have a couple of other questions. Oh yeah, we also have other fans of Artur Verocai.
Okay.
And yeah, but here we go. Wait, I think. Oh yeah, here. Luke asked, "How do you manage to find a balance between having a controlled, structured sound, but also a more improvised and creative flow?"
Oh, that comes from that comes from the jazz background, because usually when you're playing jazz, even if it's standards, when you're playing live and on a jam session, you always have to respond quickly to what's being played by other musicians and get along with that. So I really love the organic aspect of it. So so I try to bring that into my music. Even if there is small errors or mistakes that happen during the performance, if it sounds good, I really don't care. I keep the take and and respect that kind of plural, collaborative playing. And I'll try to do more of that in the future.
Okay, Luke, I hope that answered your question. And yeah, and we also have another one from Farinha Amarela. What is your intention in making the song? So I assume that is referring to Fuzzy Soul. Yeah.
Farinha Amarela, that's a Portuguese word. Those are Portuguese words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So concerning Fuzzy Soul, I didn't have no intention at all. It was a first take. So the story of that song is that I have the melody. I already had the melody. So what I wanted to record that melody, and I recorded all in a row. So what you hear in the record, it's the first take I did. Concerning the voice part, it's the first take, and then some other stuff as well, the synthesizers and all of that. I was kind of addicted to that song when I first recorded. I listened to like, I don't know, 20 times in a row. But a lot of people don't like that song. They seem to find it a bit cheesy.
I was also wondering, because you just mentioned the vocals as well. How was that distortion specifically done? Because it has like a very echoing feel to it, almost as if the vocals kind of stay in the air for a bit. Was that done with a specific software or specific device?
Yeah. Yeah, you mean the almost auto tune effect?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was made with a software that a friend of mine invented.
Oh wow, okay.
So it's not a brand. I cannot, give you any names or anything like that. But it's the process is very similar to any other tune device. In this case, I can choose the notes that I want to be auto-tuned. I can choose the notes. So I choose all of the second voice. The second voice that is playing. There are 4 voices actually doing the melody, and I choose all of the notes from each It's not random.
Okay.
I think it might seem like it's random, but it's not. It was very. It took me some time to choose all the notes, but it turned out well.
Yeah, well, it sounds very exciting as well. I also got another question, and Leote, I think, or Leote asks, are the vocals yours in the song? And I assume yes.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, I have one more question about Fuzzy Soul before we move on. And the first time I listened, I stopped the song immediately. I was like, am I still listening to the song? Because sometime throughout the song, you get a little German recording. And I was wondering, because I am German, where that recording kind of came from, or why it ended up in the song.
Well, the Moritz, which was the sound engineer for the recording session, He's from Austria, and I had this idea of putting a scientific speech on the song that that I had in my mind. So I didn't want it to be in English. So he was there, and I asked him if he wanted to record the speech, and then we translated from Portuguese to Germany, and he recorded. So that's the story of that little speech, scientific speech.
Awesome, very interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. So, unless there are any other questions, I'd say we move on to Theme Vision, which is track number 4. All right, that was Theme Vision. I have a couple questions about Theme Vision specifically. I'm not sure when it is in the song. I think it's about the 2-minute mark or so, and also towards the end where you have this kind of weird flute sound almost, or that kind of weird synth. I don't know if it's a synth actually, or if it's a specific instrument. It's kind of the one that, yeah. Go ahead.
It's a guitar actually. It's a guitar.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, it didn't. So how was that sound made specifically?
Well, with a different combination of pedals, guitar pedals. But it's a guitar.
Because it almost sounded like an oriental flute to me at times.
Yeah, that's in the playing actually. Yeah, the kind of notes that I wanted to. But it took me a long time to choose the solo for that part. It was not that direct, but yeah, the guitar.
And what I also really like about Theme Vision is towards the end where you get into this kind of synthy explosion where all the synths kind of come together, and then it goes into this final bit where the vocals are kind of isolated again and on their own. How did you kind of, get to that kind of bit? Because it's a very kind of different sound from actually the start of the song. The start kind of starts a bit more, you have your drum and everything, and then the vocals jump in. But then suddenly towards the end, you move into this very almost synthy psychedelic finale before you goes into the final vocals.
Yeah, and then it goes into the final vocals, and then it's the same melody but with a different arrangement. It's more kind of R&B in a way, with less instruments, and the rhythm feels a bit slower, but actually it's the same BPM. The only thing that happens is that the band is playing on kind of an half beat than it was before. So yeah, I don't know if this answers your question, but it was not improvised. I had that idea to do that build up using a lot of synths, and then expand it to something more R&B.
Speaking of improvisation, how often does improvisation play a role specifically in this record? How often were there kind of moments where additional things were added later and weren't really considered from the get-go when you did all the arrangements?
Well, whenever there is strings playing in the string section that we're gonna listen to the next song, the first time they appear in the record, everything is written, and the horn arrangements as well. But a lot of solos, they were improvised, and a lot of melodies, they were also improvised. Because as I was mentioning before, I have this jazz background, and I still play jazz. So there's a lot of improvisation going on. So yeah, but most of the stuff that you will hear played by the horn sections or the woodwinds, or the string section, they were all written in advance.
All right. Okay. So I guess with that being said, we can jump into the next 2 tracks. And I think we'll play them in one go because it's Little Season 1 and Little Season 2.
Yeah.
And I think we can play them together. And yeah. Okay. Unless there are any questions, let's go. All right. So that was Little Season 1 and Little Season 2. So let me just get to Little Season 2 first. I kind of really like, around the midway point of the album, we have kind of a very nice kind of, say, almost interlude. And it's a very nice balance between what we've heard so far. And feels like a nice change, but still kind of fitting with the entire rest of the album. But specifically, I'd really like to talk about Little Season 1, because I feel that's probably one of the most interesting songs I've heard in a while, simply because it starts with a very glitchy, distorted sound. Then it jumps into these vocals, then the drums come in, then you have the strings, and then you almost have these funky bits in between when the strings go away for a second. So there's just so much happening, and I'm just kind of wondering, because you don't really see kind of, I guess, unconventional song structures like that in genres like pop, maybe, or even kind of psychedelic music, and maybe they're a bit more, but how do you kind of what approach do you take there? Because obviously you're trained as a, jazz musician, and you write your own music and you do the arrangements, but how do you kind of approach this kind of unconventional structure for, I guess, more pop sounding songs?
Well, I've always liked pop music, and during my years in music schools, I always, even before that, I started playing classical guitar at the age of 13, and during that period, I was in rock bands and playing and listening to pop music. So it's very natural for me to develop those kind of ideas surrounding this genre. Yeah, and concerning the strings arrangement, I wanted to work something close to the classical arrangements from the R&B era when it came up. Those classy and luxury arrangements from the 60s and the 70s. I wanted to have that sound beneath the whole structure, and it was very fun actually to record the string arrangement. That was the main idea, and the rest just came out naturally. But I wanted to have this R&B moment in the record for sure.
No, I mean again, I just find that song, just because it goes into so many different places, I just find that quite impressive. But also, just there's so much going on, it's almost hard to, in one go, if you just listen to it for the first time, you won't really recognize everything that's going on, because there's just so much changes throughout. And I find that just quite nice, because every time you listen to it again, you'll just realize something new. And that's like what I kind of appreciate about it.
Like in some films, in some movies, you're like, if you think of, I don't know, more contemporary movies like Inherent Vice, for instance, from Paul Thomas Anderson, you have so much information during the whole picture that you need to see it and watch it again. Or even the other of his films, The Master, with Philip Seymour Hoffman, you have a lot of information because it's about Scientology, and so yeah. So yeah, I imagine it's better to listen to it one more time before making your own decision about it. Of thoughts.
Yeah. I'm just checking, because I realized that I forgot a question earlier, and I'd like to pick up on that one again.
Yeah, and Andrew, I must tell you, I have to leave at 8:15.
That is absolutely fine. I mean, again, we'll see how far we'll get, and then
Okay.
As long as we kind of get all the questions in before that, then we're good.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Sophia asked the question: what genre would you describe your music as? And if I could maybe add something to that question, because I like that question, because most of the times, or the musicians and guests we've had so far, many of them don't even really like the term genre that much because they think it kind of encloses them a bit. Would you kind of agree with that as well?
It does in a way because, well, I think genres help us to organize our own thoughts and ideas. But when it comes to the real thing, they're just names because, and that can be a problem for a lot of people. Too eclectic. Yeah, some people told me that, oh, I like your songs, but it keeps changing and it keeps flipping around every time, and they don't like that. They're more comfortable in a safety zone where they are listening to a specific genre. Well, in my case, I really don't care because I keep switching. Like my iPod, I still listen to iPod music in iPod. It's crazy when I put the shuffle on, it goes to places that are really crazy. But I would say my music has genres in it. Yeah, it has pop music, it has space age pop music, a little bit of exotic music, jazz, of course, some rock, world music. He has a lot of genres, yeah, but it's hard to put it all. It's hard to put it all in one name, but most people would call it pop music. I don't know. I don't need to call it anything, but yeah, most people would call it pop music.
Yeah, I mean that's very fair. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess it doesn't necessarily matter too much to the actual creative process you're doing. You're just kind of doing what's kind of or seems right or feels right in a certain moment.
Yeah, because it makes sense to me flipping from one song to the other. I try to have that in perspective when I'm composing those transitional moments. I try to respect that. It's not by accident that Little Season 2, it's like a string flow arrangement that starts developing from the last part of the Little Season 1, and it expands into something different, and it kind of let us as listeners to stop and be relaxed, and then the song that comes after, it's Recife, which is like a kind of tropical exotic song, and the name comes from a place in Brazil, and that was intentional to give the opportunity to the listener to somehow start to going to a different place in their own minds and starting to relax and be more and travel to a different kind of environment in their own heads. So yeah, I'm telling you this because I know it has a lot of genres in it, but I try to put them all together in a reasonable way, using these transitional moments. But I don't know when I'm creating. I don't know the exact styles that I'm gonna develop. Maybe I will do a record, a folk music record, or a minimalist record, or a classical music record, and not change a bit, but it hasn't been like that for the last ones.
Well, I mean, I'm very excited for a classical one. I'd like to listen to one of those as well. So
well, actually, I have one. It's not super classical; it's more contemporary. But there's this soundtrack I did for a movie, and it's on Spotify. So it has a few moments of classical music in there.
Okay, well, I'll link that to everyone else later, and then everyone else can have another listen as well. Before we jump into Recife, I would like to look at one more question, and it was, if you could collaborate with any artist, who would you like to work with, and what type of project would it be?
Oh, well, two musicians come to mind when I think of it. One is the vocalist of Land of Talk, which is a band from Canada, a rock band. Her name is Elizabeth. I don't remember the last name. Sorry, but I think she's Elizabeth, and I simply love her voice and the way she writes songs. I've been a fan for forever since their first record. And the other person is an artist from Brooklyn that I just recently found out about uh, because, well, actually, it's a funny story. There was this couple from Boston who came all the way from. They were traveling in Europe, and they came from Spain to attend a show I was going to have in the north of Portugal. But then the show got canceled because of the pandemic situation, and they asked me to have a coffee with them. And he was the first one who mentioned this artist, which is Lorraine. Her name is Lorraine, like L Rain, and she's very, very special. She's really, and I think she already did some work, released some records, but then this last one released last year was like really amazing. And Pitchfork noticed, and they talked about her, and then suddenly Animal Collective invite her to be a part of the like a first act for their US tour. So maybe now that she became so popular, maybe this will not happen. But I would certainly like to collaborate with her or with Elizabeth, yeah, from Land of Talk.
Awesome. Well, that sounds very good. I mean, I think I've heard of her before, but I didn't know that she was also doing or performing before Animal Collective now, because Animal Collective is also quite popular on this server. And I think that they're also releasing a new album this year, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you just also mentioned Pitchfork, and I do like to ask this question as well every time we have a guest. Do you care about music publications and what they kind of say about your music specifically? Do you kind of put a lot of, or are you interested in what they have to say, or is that more kind of, well, they have their kind of view on it, but I follow a certain vision, and that vision is the most important thing?
I don't have. Like there's this website called Rate Your Music that I didn't know about, and I had a lot of reviews in that. So a Portuguese guy texted me telling me about it, and I went and looked, and I didn't know that I had that many reviews on the last record or the previous ones. So I read a couple of reviews, yeah, and there's not much hate in it, so it's okay. But I don't spend time, searching for whatever. Pitchfork made a review about one of my performances in 2015, but that was the only time. But yeah, Spin Magazine did an article in the beginning of last year, which was very good because I was in this list for the best records of 2021 alongside Floating Points and Foo Fighters and all of that. So it was a big international review.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, because I just always find it interesting because I feel like some people do, especially I think music fans hold these public opinions and especially stuff like Pitchfork to a very high regard, but mostly musicians kind of just, shrug it off, which is kind of understandable because it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. I mean, it does certainly provide awareness, and people start looking at your music if you land on the first page of Pitchfork. But
it helps a lot.
But funnily enough, you mentioned Rate Your Music. I mean, that's actually where I found out about your music as well. So that's kind of where this entire thing.
Okay, so it makes sense.
Started.
Yeah.
And then obviously the server mentioned this album quite a bit, or I think your second album. I think Joe, who is in the call as well, has been kind of speaking about this album quite a bit. And so I guess Rate Your Music has has done its job to an extent.
Yeah. Sure it does.
Okay, so I'd say because you said we have until 8:15.
Yeah, 8:15.
We'll do one more song. So the next track, and then we'll give everyone the chance for a couple of questions. And I also have a few.
Sounds good. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so off we go to the next track. All right. So I need to be honest about this track. I think this is probably my favorite one on the album. And I mean, it seems relatively, simple almost sounds a bit wrong compared to the other tracks, but I feel like it's a bit more, it keeps it like kind of similar, throughout the song, and there's kind of a kind of melody going on throughout that doesn't really change too much, but I think it does specifically what you mentioned before. It kind of takes you to a completely different place for a moment, and it has like this very kind of, it just brings along this kind of very nice kind of feeling of almost summer, which we discussed before, and that's kind of the feeling I instantly get as soon as I hear this. And surprisingly, when I hear those piano notes throughout the song, they kind of do remind me of the kind of repetitive piano notes on the Floating Points album with Pharoah Sanders this year, and it kind of both sound very similar, and they're almost like hypnotizing a bit, and that's kind of what I really like, and it just instantly gets you into that kind of very, I guess, almost unique summer mindset.
Yeah, it's true. The song was I composed this song for a film festival that they did a retrospective on the Orson Welles movie called Four Men on a Raft. So I composed a soundtrack for that movie, not directly for the movie, of course, but to this screening that happened in the film festival, and I liked the song so much that I wanted to include the song in the record. The original song didn't have a string section. It was mostly vibraphones, and I changed that to be more into the vibe that the record has.
But there's also a horn section, correct? Is that a horn?
There's flutes. There's two flutes. Okay.
Yeah, because I also really kind of like those elements as well. But yeah, it also kind of reminds me of the more kind of traditional, I guess, samba and bossa nova sound. I feel reminds me, I think the album is Wave by Jobim, which is kind of just the purely instrumental bits. So that's kind of what it reminded me as well at first.
Yeah, I love his work.
Yeah, it is great. I mean, I've personally recently gotten into kind of the more folky Brazilian music as well. So I think Elis Regina and Fafa Belém and stuff like that. So it's just all very kind of interesting because it seems very, again, it's a bit more, it's very different to what I've kind of heard when I grew up. So it's always very exciting to kind of listen to kind of those different types of music from around the world.
Yeah, it's very common in Portugal to listen to Brazilian music all the way back since the 60s. Everyone knows all of those artists in Portugal. They perform a lot here because of the language, and so but it's a world. It's a world to discover, full of music. And like 5 years ago, I discovered this musician. He's not very famous at all, but his name is Piri Reis, and his compositions are really, really very interesting. And also I discovered another Brazilian artist called Erasmus Carlos. And this man went through a lot of different styles, and from the psychedelic beginning, from his psychedelic records into more tropical records. He has a good discography to find out about. Yeah. So Piri Reis and Erasmus Carlos. Two more
Perfect.
names to add to the list. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, a lot of people also. I think Luca was in the call earlier, but he left now. He, for example, recommended to me a while ago Tim Maya, which I really enjoyed and started. So I don't know, I've been kind of a bit, I guess, obsessed with that kind of Brazilian sort of music.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to discover. Yeah, Tim Maya is really good too. Yeah.
All right. Okay, since we won't be listening to another song, I want to give everyone else the opportunity to ask any final questions that you might have. If there are any questions, either unmute yourself in the voice channel or just feel free to add them into the listening sessions channel. I have two more questions before we end this session. I kind of realized that when I listened to your discography again, that slowly, throughout the first couple of records, you start using lyrics more and you do vocals more. And especially now on Private Reasons, I feel like that's the album with the most lyrics and kind of most, or I guess, biggest focus on vocals. Was that a development that happened in the last couple of years as well, that you've kind of felt more comfortable with vocals and lyrics and things like that?
Yeah, because these songs that I create, that I produce for this record, they all seem to have the need to have lyrics on it. So that's why I include so many songs with using lyrics and vocals. And I also sang in a lot of those tunes that it's like, I also did a bit in the first record, but not in the second one. So I wanted to express that kind of, because sometimes I do the pre-production and demos using my voice, and I ask somebody else, I invite other musicians to sing it. Although I do not sing live, only occasionally, but I wanted to hear that natural sound as in the demos and in the pre-production.
All right. Well, I mean, that definitely makes sense. I just saw that Luke has a question as well, so I'll let Luke unmute himself.
Okay. So I have this kind of hobby that I developed in the last 10 years, that is doing artwork collage. So it's kind of my work as well, so I wanted to include that in the cover. I did the first one. It was a collaboration, and then I did not do the Crocodiles or even the Worst Summer Ever record. But in this last record, I wanted to kind of getting back to that collage work. So I did the collage with by myself with the help of the label owner. And I think the fact that he has these different colors in it, it kind of reflects the different colors that happen in the music, that exist in the music, so to speak. So it makes sense for me to have them on the album cover.
I mean, that was surprisingly also the question I wanted to ask in a second, because I feel like what is special with albums or album covers is that when they somehow fit the music thematically somehow, and I think you just explained why it is the case with Private Reasons, it just makes the entire package even kind of more satisfying. And I think there are a couple of albums like this. I mean, for example, when we had the interview with Simon Raymond of the Cocteau Twins last year, kind of his album Heaven or Las Vegas, then it's kind of the same thing, because the artwork seems to fit the entire sound so well. And honestly, I'm not sure what kind of the explanation for that is. I guess there's some sort of thing going on in the brain that recognizes the colors and recognizes the sounds, and somehow that adds up together. But I think it's always quite impressive, or not impressive, but just satisfying when that perfectly comes together. Just kind of makes the entire, I guess, piece of art even more, satisfying.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Cocteau Twins. I'm a huge fan since I was a teenager. Like yesterday, I was listening to the Pinko Pack record again. Yeah, I really love.
Very good.
Yeah, and this Mortal Coil, which is a project.
Also great. Yeah.
Really love the Cocteau Twins. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we recently had a talk with a professor of ours, and he kind of explained why "Song to the Siren" is his favorite song of all time. And it is a great song, and I think I also recently learned that it is a cover because the original is from Tim Buckley, who was Jeff Buckley's father.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of all connected. But yeah, I mean, when we had that talk with Simon Raymond last year, I mean, he kind of explained to us similarly that how they made the artwork for the album, kind of using the distorted Christmas lights.
Yeah.
And it just kind of perfectly adds up to the sound of the album. And yeah, so yeah, and also if anyone ever needs a signed copy of Cocteau Twins stuff, and even you, Bruno, let us know. We have the contacts.
Oh, great.
All right. Let me just check. I saw we have one or two more questions. Okay, one is when you create the lyrics, do you prefer Portuguese to English? Is there a difference in depth of meaning?
Actually, in this record, there were supposed to be 2 songs using Portuguese language, but then we tried out and it didn't work that well because I rather use the English language because kinds of reflects the melody in a better way, because all those influences and records that I heard when I was a kid, they were all sang in English, so it's easier to me to think in English, concerning the lyrics. It's easier, but I know that at some point I will make a record sang in Portuguese. Still don't know if, probably I will. I don't know if it will be the next record or sometime later, but it will happen because I love to hear the other people's records when they sing in Portuguese. But in my work, it doesn't yet make a lot of sense to do it.
All right. Well, I hope that answers the question as well. And we have another question, I think that is probably the last one as well. What do you have planned in the future musically, and do you already know?
Well, for now, we're just going to tour Portugal and then Japan, and luckily maybe France. The UK, it's not yet on our schedule, unfortunately, but that's the main thing that's going on the next few months. And then I also gonna do I'm gonna do this program where I'll be a teacher and a conductor for an ensemble of 8 musicians. It's a project that's going to start in March this year in the north of Portugal, and after that, I still don't have that many plans professionally because I've been composing and working with these different commissions through the last 6 years, and I want to take a little break from that. So I haven't decided yet what the direction would be in that sense. Like last year, I did this huge soundtrack for a Netflix series, and that took me about 8 months to compose all of those songs. And I kind of felt like not wanting to do it again in a brief period, during a brief period. And I'm finishing this work to my first piece for a symphonic orchestra. it's a hymn, so it's a very special and different kind of music that I'm not that much into, but not into. But usually I don't work with that specific genre. It's like more of a challenge to me, but I think it would work fine. But yeah, mainly tour and be somewhere here in Japan, Europe, maybe France. That's the future plans.
All right. Well, I mean, one more person asked if there was any chance of a US tour, but I assume that was kind of already answered with that question.
Yeah, US would be perfect because because North America, they're huge fans of my work and they buy a lot of records, and I always receive these text messages asking the same question, and I think it's a question of time, really. I don't know, maybe next year probably, and it would be really amazing. But I know that probably the first place that we're going to perform it's going to be the east and west coast of the US.
Well, then I think that answers the question as well. There will be at some point a US tour. Obviously, I also hope that you can make it to the UK at some point, or maybe even Germany.
Probably Germany first.
Okay, that's even better then.
Yeah.
Okay, and unless we have any other questions, I think we are done for now. And I think, Bruno, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for spending the evening with us. I hope you had a good time.
Thank you for inviting to the show, and to all the other people that are muted that hopefully were listening.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're all very good listeners, or at least I hope. Well, yeah, again, anytime, and yeah, I wish you the best of luck with the future projects, and yeah, hear from you soon. And everyone else, have a great evening. I hope you had a good time. If you have any other questions, get in touch. And as always, our sessions are every Monday at 7:30 in Chichester Lecture Theatre. So don't forget to drop by. And yeah, I hope you all have a great evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you, guys. Bye, Andrew.
Bye.